Chapter 27. The Exam. With the timely arrival of the metal ingots, Ronin and Simons began printing, then building the Heidenreich's framework. Then, after half a day's worth of hard labor, and another day again after that, they finished it. Only to find out they actually hadn't finished the framework at all, forcing them to redo a whole third of it all over again. Turns out, the minor errors they'd assumed to be part and parcel of the build process weren't. A millimeter off in the beam alignment there, a shallow weld here, it all added up. Most of these mistakes would have been fine with a smaller ship like the Hemsway, but with the Heidenreich, even the slightest deviation could be catastrophic. The two first spent half a day making corrections, making sure the framework was perfect this time, then moved on to the outer hull. If Ronin dared say so himself, they'd gotten a lot of work done this last week. That is, in terms of assembly. They'd barely done anything at all when it came to the exams. "I really can't stay here any longer," Simon said as they were both on break. Both being big eaters, they were now on their second bar of synth paste. "I understand," Ronin replied as he chewed. "Take your time. The exams were tomorrow, and if the big guy wanted some extra time to cram for school, he would have it." Ronin wasn't a complete demon after all. Besides, he had some things he had to do himself as well. After finishing the meal, as Simons began packing for his trip back home, Ronin headed for the VR chamber. He took off the academy suit, then tore off his shirt. He was about to jump in, but before he could, a voice stopped him. "I don't want to be rude," Simons began. "But you're back. No, it's all over your body, all of those scars. What happened to you?" Ronin glanced over his shoulder, and for a short moment, his usually carefree expression was replaced by one of exhaustion. His shoulders lowered slightly, and his eyes lost a bit of their spark. Sigh. Life, man. Life. Some injuries I got from parkour, but most of these scars are from fights. "Oh," Simon said, his eyes turning towards the floor as he began to shuffle his feet. Ronin continued, "I don't know much about others, but me? After Mom and Dad passed, I had to fight for everything. Be it keeping a part-time job whilst walking around on a broken leg, protecting my food while I was walking home, or having to fight off the odd bastard just out and about looking for trouble." I didn't know it was that bad," Simon stammered. "People have different lives. To me, it's not bad. It's just normal." Ronin ended the conversation there, quickly entering the VR chamber. It was one thing to talk about the injuries he'd gotten before all the craziness with the alien artifacts started, but if Simons began asking about the other more recent scars, such as the white patches left behind by his lasgun wounds, yeah, things could quickly get complicated. As the nanites in the liquid covered his head, Ronin's environment changed. "Welcome inevitability," the computer voice said. He walked across the Gothic-styled castle, then sat down on the red velvet chair beside the fireplace. He clicked on glory in the arena. The castle next disappeared as a massive coliseum rose up in its place. Ronin squatted down, then scooped up a handful of sand. The sand fell through his fingers as teeth and nails became visible, and he thought back on the time when his apartment blew up. Back then, the voice in the dark had talked about the ladder of ascension, the fields of strife. That voice might have been right, Ronin thought. In a sense, this really is the fields of strife. He queued up for a match. Player now in queue, ranked matchmaking in progress. Match found. Enter match now? Yes, no. After about 2 hours of bare-knuckle fighting, Ronin exited the game. With him now having entered the Silver League, the opponents had become stronger. His last battle had been against a guy that specialized in biting off tendons. Ronin shuddered as he thought about how the man had chewed through his Achilles. Hopefully he didn't meet that guy again. There was an upside to facing all of these stronger fighters, though. Ronin was improving faster. He now had 5 new mental guardians, 1 for each new fighting style he'd learned. He also still had a win rate above 50%, so he was clearly still ahead. Ugh, I'll never get used to this headache, though, Ronin grumbled. The feeling of having icy needles sticking into his brain was still the same as ever. He dragged himself out of the chamber, then onto the grates beside it. He next lowered his legs, then spread his arms. Besides seeing a doctor, the Calvrakian embrace was the only thing that helped with this. Moving from one position to the next, illusory plants began to materialize around him. The 9th stance. Ronin could easily hold this level of energy now. He moved on, finally reaching the 11th stance before ending the exercise. The rest of the day would be spent working on the academy courses. Ronin might not care much for his grades, but he still had to pass the exams after all. He plopped down on the bed, then began to work. Before he knew it, he'd fallen asleep, only to be abruptly woken up again 5 hours later, all thanks to his ever-reliable implant alarm. He drowsily shut the annoying thing off. It was time to pass some courses. Ronin entered the Hero Maker, then ordered in a security detail. Being protected at the factory was one thing, but if he flew around using everyday commuter shuttles, it would kind of defeat the purpose of having all of this protection. 3 heavily shielded ships next arrived to pick Ronin up, and he swiftly entered the ship in the middle. Before long, the 3 ships landed on the Academy plateau, and he stepped out as he inhaled a deep breath. He was back. All along the vibrant green campus, streams of students were busily entering the different buildings. Spotting a large, rotund figure, Ronin jogged up to it. "I'm so screwed. It's all ruined," Simons mumbled. His face was covered in sweat and the poor guy looked terrified. "Indeed. You're in deep trouble now," Ronin added with a false voice. "Yes, my father is going to kill me when he finds out," Simons went on, talking more to himself than to Ronin. "It's all over now. It's finished," Ronin continued. "Yes, it's all over. Wait!" Simons, as if pulled from a spell, looked up at Ronin in confusion. Ronin, fully committed to the bit, was about to tease Simons further, but before he could, the voice of Principal Armstrong rang out. "Class 1G, this way. Make sure to take off any electronic equipment you have and turn off your implants. We'll be entering a high-level disturbance field." Why is it the principal that's guiding us?" Simons asked, turning even more terrified. "I don't know," Ronin said, keeping his true thoughts to himself. They continued to walk in a line as Armstrong guided them, entering one of the several academy halls on campus. Next, they were directed to exit their suits as Armstrong opened a heavily fortified door along one of the walls. Ronin gazed into the corridor behind the doorway. It led down under the building, and its walls, ceiling, and stairs were all colored white. Stepping into it, Ronin had to squint his eyes as he began to descend. There were bright lights everywhere here. The air also smelled of ozone, and he heard a deep, constant buzzing sound as he walked. "They must have added some kind of an electric field here in order to prevent us from cheating," Ronin reasoned. Fortunately, his implant was well protected behind his eye. As they walked further down, the procession of students came to a halt as Principal Armstrong opened another door. "Each of you," Armstrong began, "are to enter your own designated exam pit. Follow the lines to find which one belongs to you." The students funneled into the open doorway, and when it was Ronin's turn to enter, he was met by an expansive, dark room. All across it, circular depressions dug into the floor, and lines of light covered the ground. All of them had a name attached. Spotting the line with his own name, Ronin followed it until he reached a 2-meter deep, spherical pit. It had a small set of stairs he could walk down. But why walk when you can jump? He jumped into the pit, landing on a smooth, black surface. The previously hushed voices of the students were now gone. In fact, any and all surrounding sound was gone. He couldn't hear anything at all. The walls of the sphere next lit up with holographic text, image, and video as a flat, slightly robotic voice began asking questions. What are the key practical differences between quantum teleportation and spatial folding when traveling faster than light? So, we're beginning the exams right away, huh? Ronin thought as he considered the question. This one was actually rather easy. Quantum teleportation has severe restrictions on where you can do it, he began. Due to its extreme sensitivity to noise and interference, it can only be done at specific space stations, placed along clean Lagrange points, of which there are few. Our own solar system only has one such place. Further, in order to teleport, your own station needs to link up to the station at the place you want to travel to. This makes it impossible to use quantum teleportation if you want to travel to a new, undeveloped system. Space folding drives, on the other hand, have none of those issues and can be used almost anywhere. They are, however, slower. Their fuel is more expensive, and they spend more of it. Simply put, quantum jumps are cheap but restrictive, whereas space folding-based travel is expensive but free. A blue text box appeared along the wall of the pit, typing down every word he'd just said. He pressed the finalize button, and the flat voice began asking a new question. This went on for hours, as Ronin was asked about anything from FTL theory to which programming language to use when processing raw sensory data. Luckily, there weren't too many questions that stumped him. The exam was long and tedious, yes, but most questions proved easy to answer. Then, after solving one final equation on orbital dynamics, Ronin was given his exam results. Candidate, Ronin Maximus. MAT 1002. Mathematics of Orbital Dynamics. B. FYD 1032. Introduction to Sublight Propulsion. A. FYD 1045. Introduction to FTL Engines. A. SPD 101. Introduction to Spaceship Construction. A. INF 1003. Introduction to Spacecraft Programming Languages. B. MAT 233. Partial Differential Equations. C. Phys 220. Introduction to Materials Science. B. SPD 102. Spaceship Construction. Add-on course. A. Having done twice as many courses as everyone else, Ronin was one of the last ones out of the pit. He walked out of the dark room, then back up to the Hero Maker. Ping! I got an A in every course. Simons texted him. See, I told you we should prioritize shipbuilding, Ronin texted back, before immediately receiving a voice call. The animated hologram of Simons immediately popped up on screen. Did you get the mythical S grade? Ronin rolled his eyes. No, I didn't. And for the love of the void, would you please calm down? Anastasia got an S in Introduction to Spaceship Construction. Simons continued, most definitely not having calmed down. I figured. Ronin nodded back. She keeps scoring points in every class, so if anyone was going to get the S grade, it would be her. We need to get that grade, Ronin. What if Anastasia gets it the next semester as well and we don't? We'll fall behind. Yeah, sure. Anyways, let's talk later back at the factory, all right? Ronin finished before ending the call. Shaking his head, he couldn't help but let out a chuckle. The important thing here were the 8 new courses he now had access to, not the so-called mythical S grade. Ronin's implant notified him of a new incoming call. Who could it be this time? Nagata's face appeared on screen. Ronin, have you checked the website recently? Argus is on the move. Does this mean? Nagata made a firm nod. Yes, he's meeting up with Spectre. Chapter 28. Hammers of Fortune. Several monowheels exited the tunnel as the surrounding fog lit up around them. The specialized fog lights installed on these bikes were the only thing allowing them to travel this fast, though they might have hit someone, if there were people here, that is. There wasn't. There wasn't a single soul around. And as the bikes sped down the street, the only sounds audible in the area were the soft hums of electric engines and the crackle of loose rock pressed under wheels. Each monowheel, as implied by their name, consisted of a singular large wheel with a seat inside of it, and on each seat sat a man. Almost all of these men were covered in black market bionics and tattoos. Whatever else these men were, they were not men of the law. Leading the charge was a bulky, blonde-haired figure, noticeably different from the rest. His body had a clear lack of both tattoos and bionics, and though he'd normally wear a confident expression, right now, his face was tense. Argus hated traveling this way. He'd been recognized as a king before, and his words had been law. The underworld had belonged to him, but then that man had arrived. Like out of the ether, the ghost butcher had burst onto the scene, taking away everything that had once belonged to Argus. His connections, his supply lines, his men. He had so little left now. He still felt shivers down his back when he thought about those days. How unstoppable Spectre had been. Traveling further into the empty fog, something in the air caused the group to slow down. It wasn't a conscious act, no. It was something deeper than that. It was almost as if a part of them recognized something that their minds didn't. Be it a subconscious release on the gas pedal here, a harder brake than needed there. Their bodies clearly didn't want them traveling this way. Argus was no stranger to brutality, but this road still gave him the creeps. There was something wrong with this place, wrong in ways he couldn't understand. Passing by another building, he spotted a large group of people up ahead. Isamelos had probably caught this batch. Catching humans was what he did. The several men and women were all bound and linked by chains, and judging by their emaciated bodies, they'd been starving for months. They all shared the same empty eyes as they shuffled their way down the street. They probably already knew what fate awaited them. He could sympathize. After all, he was headed in the same direction. Argus and his men drove past the chained procession, then eventually arrived before a large facility. One by one, they parked their bikes, then entered the building, and after a short 5-minute walk, Argus left his men behind. They weren't allowed past this point. Traversing the last few corridors of the building, he saw less and less of the guards protecting this place. Spectre was a cautious man. Few were ever allowed to see him and live long enough to tell the tale. Eventually, he found himself in front of an old, familiar door. "Argus, you've come!" A voice from above spoke as the door opened. Argus walked in, then bent over in a deep bow. His eyes locked onto the gray metal floor. "I'm sorry for the delay, Master." "How's the war?" the voice asked, seemingly satisfied with his act of subservience. "We're doing well. The CLM has been halted, and we are now in the process of pushing them back." "Very well. And that other matter?" Argus felt tension seize him. This was it. Would he make it out? Before the mounting fear could break his composure, he spoke. "The brat is still alive. The 3 million credits bounty is not enough." You couldn't do it? Well, why didn't you raise the bounty?" Through gritted teeth, Argus pushed out each word. "We're fighting a war. We need the money." The dark room seemed to become even darker, and a rising killing intent broke Argus's composure. He began shivering as Spectre spoke. "I've changed my mind. You will capture that brat alive instead. Pay whatever it takes. You will also win the war. And Argus?" Yes?" "Cut off a finger." There it was. The punishment. Argus took out a small knife, placed his left hand on the floor, then pressed down the knife. "You are lucky to still have your life, Argus. But my grace is not endless. Do not fail me again." With gritted teeth, Argus rose up, then left the room, leaving a trail of blood behind him as he walked. He really hated this place. Ronin. Ronin clenched his fists as he watched the screen, his knuckles turning white. "Finally," he thought. "Finally, I have it." He'd heard every word Argus had, and now he also had Spectre's location. He opened up the accompanying locational data, and a map appeared before him. The blinking red dot, representing Argus, showed him currently being over 100 meters below ground. Wherever Argus was, this was not a place covered by any of the official maps. So, this is why no one has found Spectre yet. "How do you plan to do this?" Nagata asked, still on the line after calling him back at the academy. "We've both seen Argus's path," Ronin said, pointing at the virtual map. "So we know where Spectre is, and though I might be able to get this guy by myself, it would make this thing a whole lot easier if I had some help. After all, Spectre has an army. It would be nice to have one of my own." Nagata nodded. Ronin next showed a helpless expression. "But there's no way I'm going to ask the planetary guard to help out. The only way to do this seems to be to hire people, but to be honest, I don't even know where to start with this." The only person Ronin had hired was Simons, and he wasn't exactly what you'd call a soldier. Indeed, when it comes to hiring killers, few do. "This is a dark business, Ronin," Nagata said. "Had I not begun looking into contract work after you told me about the academy trying to enslave you, I wouldn't have known about this either." "You know where I can find an army?" "Not an army. Mercenaries," Nagata corrected. "Hang on. I'll transfer over what I have." The line went quiet as Nagata's eyes began to flicker. "There," his uncle finally said. "These are the hammers of fortune." A ping next notified Ronin of an incoming data package. "They're a moderately large mercenary company. Expensive? Yes, but they have a reputation for keeping their word, even when the fighting gets rough." Ronin nodded along as he scanned through the documents. Be it sabotaging military installations, surveillance, or taking out high-value targets, the hammers of fortune did it all. Lately, though, it seemed they'd hit a bit of a dry spot and were resting over at Planet Hartheim while waiting for a new commission. How do we get in contact? Ronin asked. They're on an entirely different planet. Do they have access to the quantum net? You have the Uninet implant, so I should be able to set you up with the device I use for this, Nagata said. It's not the quantum net, but it will reach Hartheim. After Nagata scurried around the apartment for a while, Ronin eventually received an access request from a new program. The name of the program was just a long string of numbers and letters. Likely, given his uncle's inclinations, it was something illegal. Nagata's face appeared back on screen. Just give the program access, and I'll set up a connection from my end. After some more back and forth, Ronin finally got a meeting with the mercenary company. Here's the data I've been able to gather on the targets, he said, transferring over what he had on Argus and Spectre. The screen remained static for 15 minutes. Without the quantum net, Ronin would have to wait for the signal to travel back and forth between the two planets. Fortunately, Concordia and Hartheim were relatively close to each other this year. I see, a figure replied back. The dark room somewhat hid the figure's face, but some features were too distinct for even this room to hide. The spotty gray hair and an old burn wound, covering half the man's face, told a story involving many years of combat. The man studied the documents silently. From what I can tell, based on how well Argus's compound is defended, and given the fact that his boss likely has even more fortifications installed, I estimate this job to cost between 16 to 20 million tar credits. 20 million? Ronin asked, taken aback by the large sum. Another 15 minutes passed. We will also need you to transfer over the credits before we begin the operation, the man said. This is a non-sanctioned, privately funded attack on a planet. The risks involved with this go far beyond just the target package. Ronin eventually made a reluctant nod. Sigh, all right. I can do that, but... He raised a hand, closing finger after finger until only 2 remained. There are 2 conditions I'd like to raise for such a high price. First, classify the operation as black. And second, I want to see your forces. After another delay, the leader of the Hammers of Fortune, Captain Dravenik, narrowed his eyes in thought. We'll do some of our own surveillance on the 2 sites first, but if it is as your report claims, we have ourselves a deal. He next showed a wide grin as he continued. As for our forces, I can show you that right now. The captain next carried the transmission device out of the building, revealing vast fields of crops stretching as far as the eye could see, all embraced by a warm, red-tinted sun above. Close by stood a series of ships, ranging in size from 5 to 100 meters. What must have been over 200 men sat beside them. There were large, half-opened weapon crates there, laser rifles, drones, and more. The weapons on those ships also looked powerful. The grains ahead swayed, looking like waves upon the ocean, and the captain shouted, "Everyone! We might have landed ourselves a job. What do you guys say? Do you want to continue this long, relaxing, heavenly vacation? Or do you want to enter the fire again?" "What are the specifics?" one of the men asked. "We've been tasked to take out a couple of crime lords. Anyone else?" "When do we leave?" another asked. Chuckles and laughter could be heard amongst the company as the captain glanced back at Ronin through the transmission device. He flashed a knowing smile, then turned to the mercenaries again. "We can leave right away if you want. Now, who's ready to make some money?" The air seemed to boil, and like a volcanic eruption, Every single man in the open field rose up as they shouted in unison, "Hurrah!" Ronin stared at the screen, convinced. These guys could do it. They were the right men for the job.